I went hiking alone that weekend. I usually do solo hikes a couple times a month, and I've gotten used to the quiet. I work in IT and I need that silence. I like putting my phone on airplane mode, packing a light bag, and just being out in the woods with no one around. Clears my head. This time, I went to a long trail through the state forest about 3 hours from where I live. I'd been there once before, but I only did a short loop that time. This trip, I planned to do the full trail, about 17 miles over 2 days, with an overnight in a spot I marked off on a map near a small creek. I got to the trailhead around 8 a.m. It was early September. The mornings were getting cooler, but it still warmed up by mid-afternoon. The leaves hadn't changed yet, but there was already a dry smell in the air, like the trees were starting to give up their summer. The parking lot only had one other car. I liked that. Fewer people meant fewer distractions. I double-checked my gear, locked up, and started walking. The trail started off easy, flat, wide, and well-marked. I passed through long tunnels of pine and maple trees, the canopy thick enough to keep the light filtered and soft. I stopped a few times to drink water and stretch, but mostly I just kept a good pace and stayed focused on the trail ahead. About 4 or 5 miles in, I heard something strange. I was coming around a long bend that curved through a section of young trees when I heard a sound in the distance. It wasn't an animal or wind. It wasn't a branch snapping or leaves rustling. It was music. At first, I thought it might have been someone's phone playing music, or maybe someone had a speaker with them. People do that sometimes, even though it kind of ruins the point of hiking. But the sound wasn't that clear or consistent. It was sort of messy, not on beat. Then I realized it was live. I could hear breath between the notes. It was some kind of instrument, and the closer I got, I could tell it was a saxophone. That made no sense to me. A saxophone out here? It was the last thing I expected. I kept walking slowly, listening. The tune wasn't something I recognized. It wasn't a song I knew. It just sounded like someone was improvising, playing whatever notes came to mind. After another minute, I came around a bend and saw him. A man. He was walking toward me on the trail, playing the saxophone. He had a small pack on his back and a dark, scuffed-up jacket tied around his waist. He was probably in his 50s, tall and thin with sharp shoulders. His hair was messy, graying, and sticking out from under a worn red baseball cap. He didn't look at me at first, just kept walking and playing. The sound echoed weird in the trees. It bounced around the trunks and carried behind him. When we passed each other, he looked up and gave me a short nod. I nodded back. I didn't stop, just kept walking. A few seconds later, I heard him say something, just one sentence. Something about it being a nice day for music. I didn't respond. I kept going, but the hair on my arms was standing up. It wasn't just the weirdness of a guy playing a saxophone in the woods. It was something about how calm he was. Too calm, like he belonged there more than I did. I felt like I had stepped into something I wasn't supposed to see. Something about it reminded me of one of those old strange shows on TV, like Twin Peaks, where nothing made sense but everyone acted like it did. I tried to shake it off. I told myself he was probably just a quirky guy, maybe a musician who liked playing outdoors. It's a free country. Still, the woods felt different after that. Not dangerous, just off. I kept walking, but I kept checking behind me more often than usual. I hiked for another few hours and didn't see anyone else. The trail narrowed and twisted more as I got deeper into the forest. The trees got older too, bigger, with thick roots that pushed up through the dirt and made the path uneven. I stopped for lunch on a flat rock near a bend in the creek. It was peaceful. The water moved slow and clear, and I saw a few minnows drifting under the surface. But I kept thinking about that saxophone guy. The sound of that music wouldn't leave my head. It wasn't even a tune anymore, just a feeling. Something wrong hiding inside something normal. I stayed there for maybe half an hour before pushing on. When I reached the spot I planned to camp, it was around 5 p.m. I had gone about 12 miles and was ready to rest. The campsite was perfect. Flat, shaded, and close to the creek. I set up my tent, made a small fire with some dry wood, and boiled water for dinner. As the sun went down, the woods got real quiet. No birds, no insects, just the slow sound of the creek nearby. I tried to relax, I read a little from a paperback I brought. I didn't have any signal, which was normal. I didn't mind. I was still thinking about that guy, though. I kept telling myself it wasn't a big deal. People are weird. That's not new. But around 9 p.m., when it was fully dark and I was about to turn in, I heard something. A faint sound. At first I thought it was the wind or maybe a tree creaking, but it came again. Clearer this time. A single note. It lasted a few seconds, low and drawn out. It was a saxophone. I sat completely still. The fire was nearly dead, just a few glowing coals. My tent was zipped up, but I hadn't gotten inside yet. I sat on a log near the fire and just listened. Another note, then another. Slow, breathy, and unsteady. Not a song, not even a pattern. It was far away, but not that far. I didn't move. I didn't light anything. I just sat and listened. After a few minutes, the notes stopped. Total silence again. I didn't sleep well. Every small sound made me sit up and listen. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps near the creek, but I couldn't be sure. I stayed in my tent with my knife near my hand. Nothing else happened that night. No more music. In the morning, everything looked normal. The sun came up through the trees. The birds were back. I made coffee and packed up quickly. I didn't want to stay there any longer. I had about 5 miles left to hike back to the trailhead. It should have been easy, but I felt watched the whole time. Every sound made me freeze. I kept thinking I would round a bend and see him again, just standing there, playing that damn instrument like none of it was strange. I didn't see anyone, not until I got back to the parking lot. When I reached the lot, I saw that same car from yesterday, the one that had been there when I arrived. Still in the same spot, same angle, same stickers on the bumper. But that was impossible. I'd been gone more than a full day. If someone had been hiking the trail, they would have passed me. The only person I saw was the saxophone guy, and he was walking toward me, heading the other direction. Unless he had circled back. I walked over to the car and looked inside. It was dusty, with an old parking pass on the dash dated over 2 weeks ago. The front seat had a duffel bag and some crumpled snack wrappers. The back had a camping pack, dirty boots, and a small case. A black case, long and narrow. I backed away. I took a picture of the plate and sent it to a friend when I got signal. I told him it looked like someone had abandoned their car at the trailhead, and he said he'd report it. I didn't tell him the rest. I didn't know how. I got in my car and drove home. For a long time, I didn't go hiking alone. When I did finally go again, I stuck to short, popular trails. Ones where I could always see other people. Crowded trails. No saxophones. A few months later, I got a call from that same friend. He works part-time with search and rescue. He said they found the owner of the car eventually. Sort of. The guy's name was Paul Fenton. He was a local musician who used to come out to the woods to record nature sounds while playing his saxophone. Apparently, he told people the acoustics in the forest helped him think. He went missing one fall. No one knew what happened to him. They found his body not far from the campsite I used. Or rather, they found what was left of it. Scattered bones, a jacket, and the remains of a saxophone buried under leaves. The medical examiner said it looked like animal activity, maybe coyotes, but no one was sure how he died. There was no sign of a struggle, no clear injuries. The weird part, his bones were clean, picked clean, but some of them had tiny scrape marks on them, like they'd been sharpened, almost like someone had tried to carve or file them down. The case was closed as a wilderness accident. Nothing else to go on. But I can't stop thinking about it. That man I saw, the one playing the sax, he didn't look dead. He didn't act like someone lost or confused. He looked calm, confident, like he'd been walking that trail for years, like he lived there. And if it wasn't Paul Fenton, then who the hell was it? I still hike, but I never go back to that trail. And if I ever hear music in the woods again, especially a saxophone, I'm turning around. No hesitation. I won't wait to see who's playing. There's a stretch of trail outside of town that most people don't know about unless they've lived here a while. It's not marked well. You have to follow an old road that turns to gravel and then fades to dirt. After that, you pass a small gate that looks like it's meant to keep you out, but nobody enforces anything there. If you keep going, the trees get thicker, the trail narrows. Eventually, the road disappears completely, and you're left with nothing but packed earth, forest, and the sound of water. I started hiking that trail when I moved out to the edge of town. I was trying to get into better shape, spend less time indoors. I'd hike the easy trails at first, well-worn, flat, maybe a couple miles. But after a few weeks, I needed more. More challenge, more isolation. That's how I found the creek trail. Locals had all kinds of names for it. Old Timber, River Fork. One guy called it the Spine. I never knew if that was a joke or not, but the name kind of fit. The trail cuts right between two steep hills, rocks on either side. If you didn't know better, you'd think the whole thing was carved by a knife. It was quiet out there, not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that makes you feel like you're being watched. Even in daylight, it gave me that buzz down the back of my neck. I kept going back anyway. Something about it pulled me in. The rawness of it felt like stepping back in time. You wouldn't see another person for hours, except for one. I didn't notice him the first few times, but maybe I wasn't looking, or maybe I wasn't ready to see him yet. He sat on a grassy bank by the creek, always just beneath the same bridge. It was a long cement thing with rusted rebar sticking out of the sides and old graffiti fading under the moss. You wouldn't even think it could hold weight anymore. But above it, a faded trail snaked across to the other side. That's where I first heard the music. It was a strange sound, high, breathy, smooth, but not like a whistle or a flute from school. It had a sadness to it, a strange, aching tone that felt like it didn't belong in the woods. Sounded old, too old. At first, I thought I was hearing things. It was early morning. Fog hung low and the trail was wet. I paused on the bridge and listened. The music was coming up from underneath me, light and soft, but strong enough to hear through the sounds of the creek and birds. I walked to the edge of the bridge and looked over. That's when I saw him. He was sitting with his legs crossed, just beside the water, back straight, flute to his lips. He didn't look up, didn't move, just kept playing. He looked normal, average height, dark hair, tan skin, fit maybe a little too thin. He wore a gray hoodie with the hood down and dark jeans. Nothing strange about that, but the stillness of him was what got me. He didn't flinch when a branch cracked or when a squirrel darted by his side. He sat completely still like a statue, except for his hands and breath. I stood there for a minute. I should have kept walking, but I didn't. Something about the music froze me. It didn't feel right, but I couldn't make myself move. The notes were steady, like a lullaby played too slowly, like it wanted you to sleep. Finally, I blinked, stepped back, and kept walking. My pace picked up after that. The next few times I came back, he was there again. Same spot, same posture, same music, always by the bridge. At first, I tried to ignore it. I keep my head down, move faster across the bridge, avoid looking over. But I could still hear it, the flute, echoing under the stone. Sometimes it would stop for just a second as I crossed, then start again once I was gone. I started timing my hikes differently, later in the day or earlier in the morning. But it didn't matter. He was always there. I never saw him arriving or leaving, just there, like he grew out of the ground. I mentioned him once in passing to a coworker who also hikes sometimes. I said something like, "There's this guy playing flute by the old bridge out in Timber Fork," and he laughed and said, "Stay alert, might be a satyr or some shit. Or if you're lucky, a Kanara." He meant it as a joke, obviously, but something about it stuck with me. Not because I believed in any of that stuff. I don't even like fantasy books or movies, but it was the idea of it, that weird things sit just behind normal things waiting for someone dumb enough to walk close. I took a break from that trail after that. Found a few new ones on the other side of the county. More people, more signs, more sunlight. I told myself I'd get back to Timber when I was in a better headspace. But then my car broke down. I had to cancel my usual hike that Saturday. No wheels. I spent the morning pacing my apartment, antsy as hell. I hated missing a day. It messed with my head. Around 1 p.m., I finally said screw it and decided to hike out to Timber on foot. It wasn't that far. A couple miles through town, then the old road. I told myself I'd go fast, hit the halfway point, turn around. Just enough to burn the energy off. Just enough to stop feeling like something was crawling under my skin. When I reached the trailhead, the clouds were already thick. Everything looked gray and damp. I didn't care. I pushed forward. By the time I got to the bridge, it had started to drizzle. Water hit the leaves and made everything quieter. I slowed down. No music. I paused. The bridge looked the same as always. Cracked, covered in wet moss. I stepped onto it, listening. Still nothing. I kept walking until I was halfway across, then glanced over the side. He wasn't there. I should have felt relief, but instead, it made my stomach twist. He had always been there. Every time, the absence of him felt wrong, like an itch I couldn't reach. I scanned the riverbank again. Empty. I kept going. I didn't even make it another 100 yards before I heard something behind me. Not the flute. Footsteps. Fast ones. I turned quickly, heart thudding. The trail was empty. I stood there for a few seconds, eyes locked on the bridge. Then I saw it. Something moved under it. Quick shift. A blur. It was like a leg sliding out of view. I didn't wait. I ran. I didn't stop running until I got back to the gravel road. By then I was soaked, my lungs burning. I didn't look back. Not once. I made it home 2 hours later, legs shaking, shirt stuck to my skin with cold sweat and rain. That night I didn't sleep. Every sound felt too loud. Every creak in the wall, every passing car. I kept picturing that movement under the bridge. That fast, sudden shift. He wasn't playing that day. He was hiding. After that, I didn't hike for a while. Not just timber. I stopped altogether. I'd walk in my neighborhood, but even that felt off sometimes. I'd hear things behind me, a whistle maybe, light tapping. I'd turn around and there'd be no one there. A month passed, then 2. Finally, I decided to go back. I needed to break whatever spell this was. Face it, get over it. I brought a knife with me that time. Just a little folding blade I usually carried for cutting rope or peeling fruit. I kept it in my jacket pocket, fingers resting on it as I walked. The trail felt still. Even the birds were quiet. I didn't hear the music until I was almost at the bridge. It started soft like always, but this time it stopped again when I reached the middle. I walked slower than usual. My boots hit the stone with dull, wet thuds. I looked over the edge. He was there, but this time he was looking up at me. His eyes were empty. I don't mean blank. I mean empty, no shine, no light, like marbles in a corpse. He didn't blink, just stared. Then he smiled. It was slow, too slow. The kind of smile you don't give a stranger. The kind that says I've seen you before. That was the last time I hiked timber. I never told anyone else. I moved 3 months later, across the state, got a new job, smaller town, more people around. But even here, sometimes when I walk the early trails, I'll hear something soft behind the wind. High-pitched, breathy, like a broken flute playing the same 3 notes over and over again. I always tell myself it's nothing, just a bird, just the wind. But when it gets too close, I go home. Because I'm not stupid. I don't believe in satyrs, but I believe in people who sit too still, people who don't blink, people who never leave a spot. And I know what I saw. That wasn't music. It was bait, and I almost followed it. I've hiked all over the country, but Alaska changes something in you. It's not just the size of it, or the weather, or even the wildlife. It's how far away everything feels once you step off the road. You could be half a mile from a town, and it'll feel like you're the last human being on Earth. That kind of isolation can mess with your sense of time and danger. Sometimes it makes you bold when you shouldn't be. The first time I came face to face with a grizzly, I thought it would be the most terrifying thing I'd ever experienced in the wild. But it wasn't. It wasn't even close. I was at a creek outside Soldotna in late summer. Salmon were running hard, and the water was frothing with them, flashes of silver bouncing over rock beds and gravel. I'd been following the trail along the creek for a while, my camera out, hoping to catch a few photos of the run. That's when I saw her, a full-grown grizzly about 50 yards ahead on the opposite side of the creek. Her cub was beside her, slapping at the water. My heart should have stopped. Every book, every ranger talk, every warning sign tells you how dangerous it is to be that close to a mother grizzly. But strangely, I didn't panic. She wasn't paying attention to me. Her focus was on the fish, and I was downwind, quiet, not moving fast. She lifted her head once, looked around, then turned her nose back to the water. I got a few pictures, blurry from shaking hands, but they're some of the best I've taken. Then I backed away slowly, step by step, until the trees swallowed her from view. I didn't breathe easy until I was back on the dirt road. I told that story for years, the day I saw a bear and didn't die. But that wasn't the one that stuck with me. Not really. The one that stayed in my bones happened a year later, near Homer, Alaska. And it had nothing to do with bears. It was early fall. The air had turned sharp but not bitter, and most of the tourists were gone. I liked that time of year best. The trails were quieter, the animals bolder, and the colors deeper. I had parked just outside a residential area, at the start of a multi-use trail that snaked through the hills. You could almost call it a bike path. It was wide, mostly flat, with tall trees and shrubbery lining both sides. It ran behind a few neighborhoods, dipped down into a shallow valley, and then curved back up toward the hills. It didn't feel wild. That was part of the appeal that day. I didn't want anything dangerous, just a long, slow walk to clear my head. I'd been out for about an hour when I turned around to head back. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds that hadn't made up their mind about rain yet. The trail was quiet. I hadn't seen another person since I left the car. About a quarter mile from the trailhead, I saw something move ahead of me. Not fast, just a shift in the shadows between the trees. I slowed down and scanned the path. Then they stepped out, a moose and her calf. They walked out of the woods like they owned the place, which I guess they did. The mother moved first, long legs lifting slowly over the brush like she was climbing invisible stairs. The calf followed behind her, smaller but not by much. It wasn't a baby, not like the tiny ones you see in spring, but it still clung close to her side. They stopped right in the middle of the path. I stopped too. She turned her head and looked directly at me. It's hard to explain how massive a moose is unless you've been near one. People who haven't seen one in real life think of deer or elk, maybe. But moose are something else entirely. She stood taller than me by a long shot. Her shoulders were thick, her body long and muscular under a coat of dark brown fur. Her head was like a boulder with ears. Big black eyes stared at me, not blinking. I didn't move. She didn't either. The calf reached its neck up to nibble on some leaves, but she stayed still, her eyes locked on me like she was trying to figure something out. Behind her, I could see my car. I was maybe 200 feet away from it. If she had walked another 10 yards, I could have passed on the far side, kept my distance, and gotten out. But she didn't. She decided the tall shrubs lining the trail were worth snacking on. So she stopped, and I stood there, frozen. I knew enough to stay still, to not make noise. Moose are unpredictable, especially with calves. They don't bluff charge like bears. They just charge. And if they hit you, they don't stop. They stomp until you stop moving. I didn't even dare lift my arms. The wind was dead. No leaves rustled. No birds chirped. It was like the whole forest paused with me. She chewed slowly, eyes flicking to her calf, then back to me. She didn't look angry, but she also didn't look like she was going anywhere. I could feel my legs cramping after the first few minutes. The cold from the ground was seeping into my shoes. I didn't dare shift my weight. Even blinking felt loud. It was one of those moments where your brain stops keeping time. I don't know how long I stood there. Could have been 5 minutes. Could have been 30. I started thinking about what I'd do if she didn't move. I could turn and try to hike back the other way, add another couple miles and loop around, but that would put me out after dark. I didn't have a flashlight or any food on me. No jacket either, just a light hoodie. I hadn't planned to be out long. If I waited too long, I'd get stuck out there. It would rain or get cold or something worse. Alaska doesn't care about your plans. But the real fear didn't kick in until I heard the sound behind me. It was soft like a footstep, but not from shoes. It was deeper, like something heavy stepping on wet moss. I didn't move my head, just shifted my eyes to the side. Then I heard it again, closer. Something was behind me in the trees. I told myself it was another hiker, maybe a dog walker. Maybe they'd scare the moose off and I could get out of there. But no voice came. No jingling list. No footsteps past me, just silence. The moose lifted her head suddenly and looked past me, right at the spot where the sound came from. Her ears perked forward, her body tensed. The calf stopped chewing. Something was behind me, close. The moose didn't run, but she didn't relax either. Her whole body stiffened like a bowstring. I didn't dare turn around. Every part of me screamed to look, to know what was behind me, but I held still. Then I heard another step. This one was louder. It was bipedal. I could tell. Not 4 legs, 2, but heavy, deliberate. That was worse than a bear. Bears make noise. They snort and shuffle and sniff. This was silent except for the steps. The moose suddenly snorted and stepped forward. She wasn't backing away anymore. She was walking straight at me, not fast, but not slow either. Her head was low, and her ears were still pinned. I had a choice: hold my ground and risk her charging me, or move and possibly spook her or whatever was behind me. I stepped off the path, just 1 foot, onto the grass, slowly, then another. The moose kept walking, and I watched her pass me with less than 20 feet between us. She was even bigger up close. Her body seemed to sway with weight. I didn't breathe. The calf followed, eyes wide, unsure. They moved past me slowly, step by step, hooves sinking into the soft dirt. Then they disappeared into the brush on the other side. But I still didn't move, because I could feel the presence behind me, still there. I waited, 30 seconds, a minute, then I turned. There was nothing there, just trees and brush and shadows. I scanned every branch, every clump of grass, every rock. Still nothing, but the feeling stayed, like something had been right there, watching, waiting. I walked to the car, slow and steady, my heart pounding in my ears. When I reached it, I unlocked the door, got inside, and locked it again. My hands shook as I started the engine. I didn't look back. I never figured out what was behind me. Maybe it was just another moose. Maybe a bear that didn't like the look of me. Maybe a person. I don't know. But whatever it was, it had stopped both me and a full-grown moose in our tracks. And it had waited. That's what haunts me now, the waiting. The way it didn't move past me, didn't leave, just stood there, watching. I still hike. I still go out alone sometimes. But I always carry more now: layers, flashlight, knife, bear spray. I tell people where I'm going. I check trail cameras if they're posted. But the real lesson I learned that day had nothing to do with gear or planning. It's this: the places that feel the safest, the ones close to town, flat and wide, marked with bike signs and smiling pictures of wildlife. Those are the ones that can fool you. They make you drop your guard. And that's when the forest sees you, not as a visitor, but as prey. I've had my fair share of weird trail stories, sketchy campsites, drunk people showing up in the middle of nowhere, sudden weather that comes out of nowhere. But what happened in Africa during a hike with some friends still sticks with me, and probably always will. Not because it was loud or gory or something you'd see in a horror movie, but because of how calm and deliberate it all was, and how powerless I felt the entire time. We were about halfway through a 10-day guided trek through a national park in southern Africa. I'm not going to name the exact one, not because I'm trying to be secretive, but because it probably doesn't matter. Just know it was real wilderness. Dry valleys, cliffs, rivers that only flow part of the year. Lots of animals, elephants, leopards, even lions. But they were mostly in the lower regions, and we were in more rugged country. Hot days, cool nights, not much shade, and it was quiet. I remember thinking how dead everything felt compared to the lush forest hikes I was used to. Even the birds made less noise. There were 8 of us, all from different parts of the States. Some I knew, others I met for the first time at the airport. We had 2 local guides. They carried nothing but water, machetes, and radios. That alone told me how confident they were. We followed their lead and kept our packs light. Mostly food, clothes, water, and some shared gear like tents and cooking kits. Everyone had some sort of defense, though spray, whistles, noisemakers. That was just smart protocol in a place where baboons, leopards, and snakes all competed for space. The guides mentioned baboons once or twice during our early briefings. Told us not to feed them, not to stare at them, not to leave food out. I remember laughing a little when one guy asked if they could open backpacks. The guide nodded seriously and said, "Better than you can." I didn't laugh after that. We had seen a few smaller troops in the days before, usually from a distance, just flashes of gray fur on cliffs or in the brush. They stayed away. We stayed away. No issues. Then on day 6, that changed. We had just broken camp and were hiking through a dry gorge. It was narrow, maybe 10 feet across at some points, with steep rock walls climbing up on either side. The floor was dusty and packed with dry roots, loose stones, and the occasional tree growing sideways out of the canyon wall. It was hard hiking and people were focused on their footing. I remember feeling off that morning. It was probably the heat. It hit harder down in the gorge. No breeze, just sunlight bouncing off the rocks. I felt slow, sweaty. I drank more water than usual and adjusted my pack every 10 minutes. That's probably why I fell behind a little. I was near the back of the group when I felt it. That sensation you can't explain. Like someone is behind you. Not a sound, not a shadow. Just that cold tap on the back of your neck that says, "Look." I turned and there he was. A big male baboon. Not like the ones I'd seen before, which were fast and lean and ran from people. This one was massive. Broad chest, scarred arms, face like it had seen every part of the world and survived it all. His canines showed even when his mouth was closed. His eyes weren't darting around like most animals. They were locked right on mine. Unblinking, heavy. He wasn't charging, wasn't making noise, just walking directly toward me. I froze. I mean full body lockup. My legs didn't move. My hands just hung there. I don't know how long I stood like that. A second? 5? Long enough for him to get close, too close. Then I did something that later I realized probably saved my face. I pulled my pack off slowly, held it out in front of me, and dropped it. He watched it fall like he already knew what was in it. Then he stepped around me, like I didn't even exist, and sat down right there in the dirt. He unzipped the top pocket first. No fumbling, no sniffing, just fingers on zipper open. He found a bag of trail mix, tore it open, poured half into his mouth. He chewed while pulling out other items, some wipes, a flashlight, a granola bar. He inspected everything, ate the granola bar, sniffed the flashlight, tossed the wipes. I still hadn't moved. By now, some of the others had turned around. I could hear shuffling and whispered breathing. One of the guides started approaching slowly. I backed away while he moved up. He was calm but alert, hand on a can of spray. Then the baboon turned, looked at him, and let out a low, almost lazy grunt. It wasn't a warning sound. It was more like, "Try me." The guide raised the pepper spray and let off a short blast, maybe a 2-second cloud straight into the baboon's face. It hit dead on. I saw droplets on the fur. I smelled the burn. The baboon didn't even blink. He sneezed once, wiped a paw across his face, and then went right back to my bag, started unzipping the bottom pocket. That's when people started backing up fast. One of the other hikers tripped over a root and hit the ground. The baboon stood up a little taller then, still holding the bag, and let out a deeper grunt. More forceful this time. The guide raised the can again, but I could tell he wasn't confident anymore. I've seen angry animals before. This wasn't that. This was a creature that had faced worse. It didn't care about noise or pain or our weak attempts at dominance. He just wanted what he wanted. And in that moment, that was my backpack. We left, not like sprinting away, just slowly backing out of the gorge, step by step. The guide stayed last, keeping eyes on him the whole way. He didn't follow right away, just watched us go, still chewing, then sat down again. We regrouped about 200 yards up the trail where the gorge opened up into scrubland. No one said anything. We just stood there sweating and drinking water. The guide radioed someone, but I don't know who. Maybe the park office, maybe another team. About 10 minutes passed before we heard the sound of something crashing through the brush. It was him. He was coming back. This time he wasn't as slow. We tried noise, pots clanging, whistles, shouts. He didn't care. He kept circling the group from the side, just far enough that we couldn't hit him with anything solid. His eyes were locked on the same few people, me included, probably because I had food once, or maybe because he smelled something on my clothes. We moved again, this time more quickly. The trail got steeper. The sun was burning overhead. One of the hikers had a cramp. Another twisted their ankle. And still, every 10 minutes, he would reappear. Not chasing, just there, watching, testing. We finally stopped at a rocky outcrop with a sheer drop on one side and a small cave opening on the other. It gave us a natural wall, which meant he couldn't circle. The guides picked that spot on purpose. We waited there almost an hour. Someone had a drone and flew it up briefly to check the area. Nothing, no sign. We moved out again after that, this time more alert. Packs zipped up tight. No food outside. People carrying sticks in both hands. The baboon didn't come back again that day. That night, we set up camp in a small plateau clearing with good visibility. No trees close by. Nothing but dust, brush, and stars overhead. Everyone was silent as we pitched tents and boiled water. There was a tension in the air I hadn't felt before. The kind that comes from being reminded that nature isn't just scenery, it's danger with teeth. I checked my bag that night. Everything was still damp from where his hands had crushed the fabric. There were bite marks in the plastic food bag, some gear missing, nothing major, just stuff that now had a weird weight to it, stuff I didn't want to touch anymore. I slept lightly. Every sound outside the tent made me flinch. The rustle of wind in the grass, the crack of a twig, a cough from someone a few tents over. But nothing came. The next morning, the guides changed our route. Said it was due to trail conditions, but I think they didn't want us going back the way we came. I didn't argue. None of us did. The hike finished without another incident. 10 days in total. All the danger we faced was in that one 24-hour stretch. But it was enough. When I got home, I told the story to a few people. They laughed at the idea of a baboon being scary, said it sounded funny, like a cartoon. One guy even made a Dragon Ball joke. Super Saond baboon, he said. I laughed with him, but inside I was remembering the way he looked at us. Like we were the ones in his territory. Like we didn't matter. Like he knew exactly what we do and didn't care. That's the part that stuck with me the most. He shrugged off a direct hit of pepper spray to the face, and then unzipped my bag like it was a birthday present. 200 words. Let me know if you'd like another story based on a similar real-life theme. Just realism, no fantasy or fake suspense, and fully self-contained. It was late September when I went backpacking alone through part of the Chugach National Forest in Alaska. I had taken a week off work and wanted nothing more than to hike, sleep outside, and feel that quiet distance from everything human. I've always liked hiking alone. Some people think it's risky, but I've found it's one of the only times I can really think clearly. No conversations, no distractions, just my boots, my pack, and whatever's ahead. I had planned a 4-day loop that cut through some valleys, went up above the tree line for a bit, and looped back around by a chain of lakes. Most of the trail was remote, but well-marked. I had a decent map, a satellite beacon just in case, and enough food to last me 6 days, even though I only planned for 4. I liked being over-prepared. The first 2 days went smooth. Chilly nights, bright mornings. Frost on the ground in the early hours, then warm sun in the afternoon. I saw a couple of marmots, lots of birds, and a few old bear tracks on a dried mud trail, but nothing that made me nervous. It was peaceful in the way that makes you forget about cell phones and clocks. Time slowed down. I stopped thinking in hours and started thinking in terms of light, shade, and miles. By the third day, I had looped around toward the lakes. These were deep, glacial basins with sharp, rocky edges and ice-cold water. You couldn't see the bottom more than a few feet down, even though the water was clean. I stopped by one of the lakes around midday. It had a rocky shoreline with big smooth stones you could sit on. I took off my pack, dropped down on one of those warm rocks, and pulled out a granola bar and my little water filter to top off my bottle. I was tired, but not in a bad way. Just the normal sort of tired you feel when you've been hiking all day. My knees were feeling it, and my shoulders were a little stiff from the pack. I leaned back, letting the sun hit my face. Everything was quiet except for a bit of breeze and the faint sound of small waves slapping against the stones. It was a peaceful moment. I was sitting like that for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, not doing much of anything, when I saw something in the water. At first I thought it was just a submerged log, something dark and big about 30 yards out. It wasn't moving, but then it did move, just slightly, and then a second later it lifted up just a little, and I realized it was a head. A huge head, with ears and a dark, wet snout. A moose. My heart jumped, but not in fear. Not yet. It was just surprise. I'd seen moose before, from far off while driving, or on trails where they were half hidden behind trees. They always looked big, but this one looked massive even from a distance, and only its head and a bit of its neck were out of the water. I stayed still and quiet. I didn't want to scare it, and I sure as hell didn't want it coming toward me. But then it started to walk out, and that's when things shifted in my brain. It just kept coming. First the neck rose up, longer than I expected. Then the shoulders broke the water. Its back emerged, long and wet and dark brown. Then more. Its legs, impossibly long and skinny, rose one after the other out of the lake like stilts, water pouring down them in sheets. It didn't charge out, just calmly and slowly walked up from the lake, and with each step it looked taller. I don't know what I had expected, but it wasn't this. In my mind, moose were just oversized deer. Clumsy maybe, weird looking, but manageable. What was walking out of the lake didn't look manageable at all. It didn't even look like it belonged to the same category as deer. It looked prehistoric, almost like a hairy giraffe with hooves. The shoulders must have been at least 6 or 7 feet high. It was like a horse standing on stilts, but way more solid and way more intimidating. The antlers weren't even that big, which was the worst part. If it had been a huge bull with a full rack, I might have understood the size. But this was a cow, no antlers, just a plain female moose, and it was still enormous. She shook herself once like a dog, flinging water off her coat in big droplets, and then stood still on the rocky shore. She was facing me, but her head was slightly turned. Her ears flicked a little. We were only about 20 yards apart. I hadn't moved. I remember thinking, there's nowhere to go. Behind me was just more shoreline and some low brush. To my left, the slope went steeply up, too steep to climb quickly. My pack was on the rock next to me, and she was between me and the trail. I didn't move. I didn't even reach for my pack. I just sat there. The moose blinked slowly, then lowered her head. She started nibbling at some wet grass by the lake edge. That calmed me down a little. She wasn't staring me down. She wasn't charging. She was eating. That was good. I decided to wait. But then I heard something behind her. A second head popped out of the lake. Smaller, narrower, younger. A calf. My heart went cold. I hadn't noticed the calf before. It had stayed underwater or behind her somehow, maybe lying down in the shallows. But now it was walking out too. Same motion, rising like a creature from a dream. It walked stiffly up beside her, legs awkward, head turning toward me for a second before it ducked behind her body. And just like that, the whole situation changed. If I thought I had to be careful before, now I had to be silent. Because a moose cow with a calf is dangerous in a way that few animals are. It's not aggression, it's something colder. Like a switch gets flipped and they'll stomp you to death before you even realize they've decided to. I didn't move. I sat with my hands flat on the warm rock and tried to breathe as little as possible. She kept eating. The calf stood behind her, looking around, occasionally putting its nose into the water or sniffing the wet rocks. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I don't know exactly how long. I lost track of time. My legs started to ache from sitting so still. My left foot went numb. I didn't care. I thought maybe, just maybe, they would wander off. But instead, they started walking toward me. Slowly, not directly, kind of angling up along the shoreline. But closer. I tried not to panic. I knew running wasn't an option. You don't outrun a moose. And especially not when there's no trail and nowhere to go. I slid my hand slowly toward my pack. Not to grab it, just to touch it. Just so I'd know where it was if I needed to move fast. The cow paused about 15 feet from me. The calf was right behind her. She looked up, looked right at me. She didn't snort. She didn't stamp. She just stared. And I realized she was trying to decide. Not in an angry way, not in a crazy way, just calculation. Like she was weighing something in her brain. Is this a threat? I sat completely still. My camera was in my pack. I didn't even think about grabbing it. I didn't want her to see a sudden motion. She took one step forward. My heart jumped. Then she lowered her head again. Not to charge, to eat. She started chewing on some low shrubs that had grown out between the boulders. Just like that, she decided I wasn't worth worrying about. The calf did the same. And then, as if nothing had happened, they just kept moving. Up the shore, around a little bend, and slowly out of sight. It took maybe 5 more minutes before I felt okay to move. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding and slowly stretched out my legs. My foot was completely asleep. I had to rub it with my hands for a minute before I could stand. I looked around. The lake was still. The sky was starting to get a little hazy. Clouds moving in maybe. The wind had picked up. It was colder than before. I stood, put on my pack, and walked away from that spot without looking back. My legs were stiff. My neck was sore from holding still. But I was okay. I didn't see another moose that trip. The next day I hiked out of the loop, back down through the valley and toward the trailhead. I saw tire tracks and trash near the parking lot, fast food wrappers, and a beer can. It was a jarring contrast. From untouched glacial lakes and prehistoric animals to litter. But I was glad to be back near the car. Driving home, I couldn't stop thinking about how wrong I had been about moose. They aren't like big deer. They aren't even like other animals. They don't act like they're scared of people. They don't care about people. That's what makes them scary. A bear will usually run away. A wolf will avoid you. But a moose will just stare at you and decide. You're not in control. Not even a little. I don't talk about that trip much. Nothing happened, at least not technically. No attack, no wounds, no chase. But that was the most afraid I've ever been in the backcountry. Just sitting there, knowing there's a creature the size of a horse made of muscle and bone, with hooves like sledgehammers, and it might decide your presence is a problem. I still hike, still go alone sometimes, but I see moose differently now, and I don't sit by lakes as long anymore, especially not when I see something dark sticking up out of the water.